Yes, I'm waiting for the launch on YouTube. Мгм. Oh, yes. And finally, I think that we launched it. So I need to check our translation on YouTube. Yes, sorry guys, so I thought it took some time to finish all preparation work. Yes, and yes, now I think that we are live. So yes, but we have I have problems with pictures. Oh, sorry. So and with connection, I don't know. I think it's problems with Discord, and so we have some problems with launching it on YouTube on good quality. So we have a picture and we have sound, but the internet connection is bad. So now it takes some time to understand why. So yes, I think we can try to do it with all these preparations. So yes, I think we can start. I can see that internet connection now is good, and the picture, that we have a picture. So okay, finally when we will have a video, we will cut this beginning. So thank you very much. I think we can start. Thank you for waiting that 30 minutes, and thank you for coming. So today we have a webinar with consensual subjects. It's our traditional webinar that we have with consensual subjects with various of countries. And today we would like to speak with our colleagues from Finland, so from the organization AKL. So guys, firstly I would like to congratulate you on your 50 years of walking. So I know that our director Sasha Belik was in Finland and also congratulated you with this date. So, and this is a good chance for me to congratulate you too. Today I'm in a special scarf of your organization. That also was a gift from Sasha that he received in Finland. And yes, today with us the member of board of the AKL. So I would like to welcome Yuri. Yuri, Tuka and Matthias. They are all members of the board of AKL, and also they are conscientious objectors from military service. So today I would like to talk about the situation in Finland. It's interesting. It was also interesting because of the situation of Russian invasion to Ukraine and all these military relations that we have. All this this conflict affected Finland also, and we've seen a lot of threats from government of Russia, so about their entering NATO, and also we can see that some countries are trying to militarize the system, and of course it affects conscientious objectors of from military service. We can see new laws, for example, and it's of course it make all the procedure, for example, for alternative military service is more tougher than it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So thank you for coming, guys. Yes, glad to see you today. And I would like to start from our traditional question, I think, more general question. So it's about the topical situation with conscription in Finland. So what you have noticed, so what we are going to talk more about maybe legislation, and so I will compare it a little bit with Russia. So what topical situation do you have in Finland? So I would like to know some issues about conscription. So how many people go through conscription, for what terms, in what conscription age do you have, what exemptions do you have, and of course we are going to talk later about alternative military service. So maybe Yuri, you can start.
Yes, thank you so much, Artem. It's good to be here. It's a little, how would I say it, maybe not frightening, but exciting at least to be here and representing the organization. So my name is Jure. I'm a 27-year-old conscience objector, Finland. At the moment I live in Jyväskylä in central Finland and study social sciences and philosophy here. I've been a board member of AKL since 2017, and what I've done within the organization is that I've mainly concentrated on these sort of advocacy events, such as working with parliament members and going to events and such. I'm sorry, what was the question? Like, what are the main
So yes, I would like to start from the general questions about the conscription in Finland. So what's the topical situation? We are going to talk lately about maybe some last 2 years according to Russian invasion to Ukraine. But what topical situation now do you have? So let's start from the usual conscription service that you have in Finland still.
Great. Well, my colleagues here can of course fill in if they think that I'm incorrect or if they think differently, but legally speaking, as far as I understand, there really hasn't been that many differences made into our systems in 2022. Of course, socially, the situation has changed a lot. So since full-scale invasion, majority of the population has shifted from being neutral or against to being pro-NATO. And with regards to conscription and with regards to people who suspect, of course, the social situation is also more difficult. I'm sorry, you hear me well?
I think yes, I can hear you. Yes, everything good.
But yes, I think mainly the shift has been social. So legally speaking, it hasn't been that many issues that come to my mind right now. Of course, the number of those people who've chosen to eject from the reserve, those who have already gone through their military service, have since 2022 chosen to object, having already been part of the reserve. That number has risen dramatically. I would say that's maybe the only one that comes to my mind that would be sort of a non-social change that would come to my mind at least. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
of course, Tuukka, I'm not free to.
Yes.
Yes, hello
Hello.
everyone.
Yes.
I'm Tuukka. I also study philosophy. I'm a bachelor of philosophy at the moment, studying to be a philosophy teacher. And my specialty is conscription ethics, and I'm very interested about that. But to those who do not yet know or do not have this data available, I'd like to briefly summarize the Finnish conscription system. So Finland has a mandatory conscription service to males of 18 to 30 years old, and after that, if you completed your service, you will be joining the reservist service, and around one third of the whole cohort, but 2/3 of the male cohort perform some sort of service. So around 20,000 people every year go to military service, and around 7% of those who serve in civil service. But in terms of numbers, we have an active reserve of 230,000 and a theoretical maximum of 800,000. But that is a pretty theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of old people in that 800,000. But about that, what Juru said about people resigning, so that is probably the biggest difference. So it has been there has been a big increase in people who have resigned from reservist duty. So in 2023, 1,650 people resigned from the reserve and joined this sort of civil reserve. And in 2022, right when the fighting was at its was starting, and 3,815 people resigning from the reserve. That's probably the biggest difference in we've seen.
So, if I'm correct, so you have two types of reserves. Yes. So you have civil
Yes.
reservists and military reservists. Because
Yes.
yes, I'm going to compare it with Russia. So in Russia we have like if you finished your service for 1 year as a typical general service in a conscription army, so you will join the reservist system, and this is only like military reservist system. And what people do in civil reserve, what it looks like?
Well, at this moment, civil reserve is purely like a theoretical term.
Mm-hmm.
The Ministry of Labor has this possibility to summon people to perform extra duties, but this hasn't been activated, and that's probably one of the things I think when the system in Finland might become more militaristic, there might be a need to, or this sort of desire to activate this civil reserve, which means extra duties to people who have previously participated in the civil service.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's been quite a lot of public discussion about that, especially during the Corona or the COVID-19 pandemic. There was some public discussion about like whether we should use the civil servants or the civil maybe. Well, I'm not 100% certain whether it was the civil servants who were in the civil reserve or those who were in active civil service duty. But regardless, there was talk about like using that civil that group of people for duties of the society, but for like various societal duties. But as Luca said, as of now, there's really no active use for us.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Matthias also, do you have anything to add, please?
Yeah, I actually do. And well, a quick introduction. So I'm Matias Kaskiloto, and I have also been in the board of AKL starting at 2016, I think, something like that. And I'm currently studying information studies in University of Tampere, and my thesis is about the information needs of those young conscripted people that don't want to perform their armed service in traditional ways, because that is also one current problem within the Finnish conscription system. But about that civil reserve thing, it's kind of like, well, to put it bluntly, it's pretty much useless because the Finnish law has states that during conflict, like every person, uh, even those who haven't ever been conscripted, like women or like basically everyone is um, mandated to listen to the orders of I don't know what it means, like police officers or like these sorts of authorities during like they can be assigned different missions during conflict times, like everyone. But for some reason they make this civil reserve thing, which is well basically the same thing. The only thing that differs is that if a regular person, let's say a woman who hasn't gone to any armed service or anything, refuses to do orders, refuses to take orders from police officers during conflict, they will receive like maybe few days of prison sentence. But if someone from the civil reserve like declines offers from police officers, they will get a prison sentence of 2 years. So it's mostly it feels like just another creative way to punish us and nothing more. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Mhm. And of course, here also have questions because I'm interested in analyzing these 2 last years. We can see how war affected Europe. So there are a lot of laws, for example, in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Denmark, for example, to oblige women to serve in the army or to bring back conscription like it was in Lithuania. Yes, and here I'm quite aware of the procedure of changing the military service with alternative civil service in Finland. I know that it's possible to make in period of conscription, for example. That's the thing that we do not have in Russia. So in Russia you need to apply before the conscription and then you do not have an opportunity to change it. So my question here is, can you highlight maybe some issues, maybe Parliament of Finland and some politicians? What suggestions do they have in terms of conscription, in terms of alternative civil service? Do they want, for example, to change some legislation in this sphere? Of course, to make the situation worse for concession objectors. So maybe I've heard some bills from the Parliament of Finland, but it was in the news and I didn't check the source. But maybe you have something to share in this point. How the war between Russia and Ukraine affected Finland and affected especially concession objectors? Maybe Yuri, yes?
Yes, thank you. I tried to remember all of the recommendations given by the government with regards to this, but I may be again missing some, so please do come, Matthias, fill me in again. But yes, there's been quite many recommendations made by the government. One of them is, as you stated, in Finland it is still possible for anyone, if they choose to go to military service, to change. So they can still, while during their military service, they can still change their mind and choose to go to civilian service instead. If they choose to do so, as of now, it would be so that the time that you have spent during your military service would be counted as a part of your civilian service, so you wouldn't have to do it again. But one of those recommendations is that that time wouldn't be counted again. So let's say you've done 5 months out of your 6 months of military service, and for ethical reasons you choose to go to civilian service. But instead of that 5 months being counted in, you'll have to start the 12 months of civilian service again. So it'd be 12 plus 5, 17 months. That's one. And in addition to that, well, one of the most concerning changes that I'm fearing will come into place in the following years is that they are trying to bring the conscription days. How would I said it the best, maybe conscription days or conscription events in the schools. So as many people may know, we are quite the nation, quite proud of our educational system and quite renowned for it. For that, it just sounds like something I wouldn't want to even imagine happening here, but that is what they're planning. So they're planning to this sort of a day that would be for everyone as a part of their education on the year that they turn 18. So not only for legal men, but also for legal women, all the people going through the educational system, in which the military would go in the schools and tell about the military service. During that time, they would also find their papers, like and choose which where to go and what to do for the military service. So I think that's the most concerning aspect as far as I would think of it personally. But Tuukka and Matthias can of course fill me in.
Yes, Matthias?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this wasn't an official statement by the government, but like one, I don't know if this was already mentioned. Well, maybe briefly, but our defense minister gave an very interesting interview to a local newspaper about how he's going to stop people from escaping the reserve. Like there's this possible about leaving the army reserve and joining the civil reserve, those who have completed their army service. And our defense minister Häkkänen, was he like he wanted to kind of stop this, prevent this thing, but he didn't have even any concrete plans about it. Like, and there was kind of like some sort of media shock about it, and of course we as an organization took advantage of this. Like we showed the whole country how like twisted and weird their ideals about like these sort of like how militaristic their views are, and so yeah, basically nothing happened. He just caused lots of chaos, and many people, the number of people who left the military reserve and joined the civil reserve, that number of people went up tremendously. So he actually made things worse for himself. So, but that was kind of a interesting media spectacle, to say the least.
And talking about military at schools, so it's also the problem that we still have in Russia. For example, the program of the popular Russian subject at school, that it's called like the general points of how to save your homeland. So it was in the previous times it was very basic. So you need to understand how to proceed, first medical help, and for example how to work with fire extinguisher and so other. So it was some general terms of living life in an emergency situation. But now they changed it. They put Russian authorities. They changed the plan of this subject, and now pupils, now students at schools, they are obliged to study some points of military theory, and to, for example, to understand how a Kalashnikov rifle works. So it's now from the 1st September of this year, it's now the subject in Russian schools. And I'm not talking here about the discipline that was called the important talks that Putin initiated after when the war has started. And talking about military at school, so what it looks like at school? So they have a promotion of, for example, service or contract service in the army, or it's like a promotion of being proud of your army and to serve your term in conscription army. So what the idea of authorities here, and from what classes do they have this invasion at schools? So from the first classes, or maybe it's high school? Yes, maybe Tuka?
Yes, this topic is very much close to my heart as I'm studying to be a teacher, and the discussion here, in practice, none of these sort of ideas have been put into place but the idea is that as women are tried to be implemented into the system, it would make sense to put them at the high school level or the secondary school level, so that they could include this sort of military event at the same time. But the ideas mostly have been pretty pushbacked, as the idea of putting this sort of military subject to schools sounds pretty like foreign to Finland. It sounds more like a thing that would happen in Russia. But especially I would say that the National Coalition Party now, the party holds the prime minister seat, the president seat, and the defense minister seat. These sort of ideas, some of their members seem to introduce these sort of ideas, and they don't see them as this sort of very hostile idea. But if if I'd reflect on this, I would say that there has been these sort of events where the military has come to the school, or the children have been going to visits to the barracks, but usually in cities where the military is a big employer. So in that sense, it seems more natural. But this sort of nationwide militarization of schools hopefully doesn't happen. I think AKL will push back, and the teachers associations will push back. But I think it would not be it would be less militaristic. It wouldn't include any gun training or anything like that. It would be more the military personnel would come and talk about the military service, etc. Something like that.
So okay, so it looks like yes, what they wanted to make in Russia, but in Russia it was yes, we can compare it a little bit, because in Russia they tried to put the militaristic to put the military at schools. For example, in the beginning of the century, so it was like the system. But of course, after the war, they make the military more closer to the students at schools. Yes, and here I would like to go to the another topic, and to speak a little bit about alternative civil service in Finland. So could you please also explain to our subscribers, to our viewers, the general rules for alternative civil service in Finland, how it's possible to change military service to alternative civil service, and also what punishments do you have, for example, if you would like to be a conscientious objector and you do not want to go also through the alternative civil service. 1 year ago, or maybe not 1 year ago, but in December, if I'm not mistaken, we had Mitja Jakinen, also a conscientious objector from Finland. We made an interview with him, and he was, if I can say, under the home arrest for the quite big period of time, for his views, for his idea to be like fully conscientious objector. So yeah, maybe Yuri, you can start to describe some basics, topical rules about the alternative civil service in Finland now.
Yes, of course. So there's many different times when a person can start their alternative civilian service. They can either start it before they choose to, or like before they do anything, before they go into military service at all, or then they can start it during the time that they would be in the military service. So either or, depending on the person. Personally, what I did was that I just went through. So if you choose to do so, if you choose to not to go to military service at all and just start your civilian service from the get-go, then it's 12 months. So 12 months of civilian service, this is the same duration as the maximum duration of military service in Finland. So for military, that would be 6, 9, or 12. And for civilian, it's always 12. And if you then choose to do what Mitya, our colleague, dear friend, he chose to go for the road of total objection, which is still illegal in Finland.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, it would be 50% of the time that is left of your service. So that would be 12 months of civilian service, and he would do 6 months. I don't remember exactly how many months he had left, but for him, it was, for everyone, it's half the duration. The main way in which people do it is that they do as he did. So he went through house arrest. Some people also choose to go into into prison. So that's depends on the person, of course. If there's a previous criminal record or any other sort of reasons for which the person couldn't go into house arrest, then it's case by case. But most of the people nowadays go through house arrest.
And talking about the procedure, it's quite interesting for me always, because we had a webinar with concession subjects from Greece, and it was quite interesting that in Greece, so you need to make it like facts, that you have some views, pacifistic views, for example, or because of religious issues, you don't want to borrow a gun in your hands and to go through conscription. So, talking about the procedure, is it very difficult to prove, for example, to the board, if you have a board of people who decide to change military conscription with alternative civil service, or it's not like a big problem in Finland, and you maybe do not advocate for that? So what about the procedure? Maybe Tuka? Yes?
Yes, this sort of procedure was abandoned in 1985, and this sort of unscientific study of someone's ethical ideas, and then it caused a lot of conflict because some were exempted and some were not. But this has since been abandoned, and it has raised some critique, because many feel that some people go to civil service because it's more comfortable. But I would say this sort of social stigma prevents that pretty much. I think people very rarely go to civil service because it's more comfortable. Myself, I partook in the basic training, and I left after a month. So I have this sort of idea of what the training was like in the military, and I would say Finland really doesn't have this sort of big problem. The only problem we have is when someone has already served a little bit, and then they apply for civil service, and then the application is delayed or something. But AKL really actively asks people to call us, and then we'll try to get their papers on progressing, so that the sort of delay is minimal. And it is illegal. They would have to, by law, let you out on the next day at the very least. So it should be easy to change to civil service.
So the procedure was abandoned, and now if you would like to change military service with alternative service, you need to apply. And so it's you have a result automatically without any hesitations from some people who will decide, like it's in Greece, like it's in Russia. Okay, great. But talking about, you mentioned this problem with people who, for example, who has gone through conscription and then they decided to change it with alternative civil service? And do they need to apply for special board, or do they need also apply for the, I don't know, military offices or and other institutions? And the problem is only with delaying. And this delay, is it military offices make it on purpose, or it's only a bureaucracy question? Maybe yes, Tuka.
Yes, it is illegal delaying, usually because they have some sort of personal issues with the person who is applying. Or then there's this idea that maybe the person will withdraw their application for civil service if they're bullied enough. But usually these are resolved fairly quickly because that's bad press. They don't want that.
Oh, and is it possible to, for example, challenge it in courts? For example, if it's illegal, so you can apply like with a claim in courts and to challenge this delay as something illegal. So the court, do you have this judicial practice? I would like to talk about judicial practice later, but I have questioned this because I'm quite interested now about this possible challenge, about the possibility to challenge it in courts.
I think if you have it in writing that you have given this sort of announcement to change the civil service, and for some reason it is buried and you're kept in the barracks against your will for several days, then you might be entitled to compensation.
Wow.
So I think there, but I don't know any legal cases right from my mind about this. But they should. It might be. I think they might receive some punishment if they are found breaking the law intentionally.
Okay, so it's the situation is much better than even in Greece. Yes, and here I would like to also ask my common question about the alternative civil service. So, what institutions? How it's possible to go through alternative civil service? In what institutions man can serve? Yes, from the interview that I made with Mite Jakanin, I know that he had an alternative civil service in library, but then he became a total concession subject and he denied to do it. But except libraries, how's it? What institutions do you have? And of course, my favorite question is how much money can people receive from the alternative civil service? Because in Greece and in Russia it's quite low. Yeah, maybe Matthias, can you answer?
Yeah, about like the different, let's say, workplaces of alternative civil service, then yeah, it's a wide variety. It used to be really limited, like decades ago, many decades ago. It was just whatever the state told you to do, like road work or things like that. Nowadays, you have lots more options to choose from, partly due to our lobbying work. But yeah, libraries, healthcare services, mm, like educational services, and yeah, those. Oh, well, I was in a local church, so yeah, like, and even like, what's like for the city, like I don't know what's the fancy word in English, but if you're working directly for your city or some of its facilities, that's also possible. And even with some state facilities and things like that. Like the main rule is that no, what's the word, like private companies, those aren't allowed. And I think even political parties are banned from being job places for them. So yeah, was there any follow-up question or?
Yes, I'm asked also about money. So how much money
Yeah.
can men receive? From
Well,
do you have limits here?
Yeah, not very much. Was it like five, roughly like five, a little old at the start?
Um,
I may remember better, but I think that it's complied of mainly three different parts. So the place in which you do your civil service, they are obliged to provide you housing. That can be made in various ways. Some people maybe stay at their parents' houses because they're still young, or for others, the place of service may rent an apartment or
I also have a
various
question
ways.
here, Yuri, if I may, about apartment, about accommodation. So in Russia, we have a funny rule that if it's possible, that the institution, the place where people can serve alternative self-service, if they can provide a person with an accommodation, so it's possible to transfer a man from, for example, Moscow to Vladivostok, so he can go through alternative civil service in another part of Russia. But mostly institutions they do not have accommodation, and because of this, a lot of men go through alternative civil service in their home region. Is it similar in Finland?
I would say that it's case by case. To be honest, I don't have any statistics. Like, for example, for me personally, I lived in Tampere, and then I moved to Helsinki for my civil service. But it was my personal choice. So you can do whatever you choose. Because of the fact that it's by law, the requirement for the civil service place provide you with accommodation can be a hindrance. For me personally, it was an organization that had enough budget for that, so they were able to provide me with a rental apartment. But in addition to the accommodation, there's two forms of payment that you would get. So you would get the daily allowance, I believe is the correct translation, which is not a lot. It depends on the time of service that you are getting it. So from 1st to 6 months, you'll get lowest amount, then from 6 to 9, second lowest, and 9 to 12 highest. So it's the same amount that all people going through military service would get. And then in addition to that, there's also an allowance for meals. So if you don't get a meal from your place of service, as most people don't, then they'll just give you, I think it's like, how much is 12 euros or something that you would use not for like a lunch during your workday.
Oh, no, we can say that these conditions are quite quite satisfied. So even if they can, but maybe it's my point of view, and also from Russia, when you can receive up to maybe 200 euro without any daily allowance for meal. Yes. Okay. So I would like here. So we have this chapter in our webinars about the personal experience. So maybe I would like to start also with Matthias, because my colleagues they gave me information about that you have personal experience of concession objection in church, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it was your case. And could you please describe how it was? And what is it? The alternative? Can I name it like alternative civil service in church? Yeah. So quite like personal experience of doing it.
Okay.
Matthias, sorry, I can hear you quite bad. Maybe you can fix the mic.
Is it better now?
It's better, yes.
Okay. So let's take those. But again, like it was a rather small town which I grew up in, and they were like they weren't. I don't think they were that experienced in having civil servants in their ranks, because lots of the time they were as confused as I am with the different workarounds, like register different things with the like internet application that civil service workplaces all have are registered in. But anyway, like what I basically did that I was making sure that the at the time my church was moving some old church documents to online,
Mm-hmm.
and I was basically there checking, making sure that everything went smoothly because oftentimes there was some duplicates and things like that. So again, it's kind of like my current study field, information studies. So I should know the fancy word, but I don't know it in English. But anyway, so yeah, like it was basically that, and lots of these sort of I don't know what to say it, but low skilled tasks like brewing coffee and taking the post and things like that. I think that's pretty common among civil servants and like trainees and everyone like that to just give those kinds of tasks to us. So yeah, but like as an atmosphere, I think it was pretty good that even though it was a small town, my colleagues were pretty respectful towards me, and yeah, there wasn't any conflict with that. I think like even one of the priests in there used to be a civil servant back in his day. So yeah, so I think the atmosphere was rather nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and also, so it was the period of 12 months, or it was 12 months, yes. And now you are in civil reserve, or it's like in reserve that we can call civil, yes? Or it's like more.
Yeah, like I don't know the exact age limits in the civil reserve. Probably the same that they are in the regular reserve. So I don't know, like until I'm 55 years old or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but there has been talks about raising the reserve age also. So there's that.
Okay, and here I have a question maybe to all of you guys. Do you have this, I can call it like situation, because in Russia, maybe in the late 2010s, maybe 15 years ago, it was a tendency that if you are going through alternative civil service, and if you of course evade also illegally from the conscription, state institutions face some barriers to you if you'd like to work for the state or for the regional authorities or local authorities also. And in some corporations, some organizations also, there are a lot of people who ask for your experience in military. So, and if you answer like I had my alternative civil service, it looks like they understand it like you evaded from army. It's also I'm asking this question also because of the last 2 years, and I understand how the war affected Finland. So, do you have this specific maybe feeling or conditions that state transmit this message? So if you, for example, did alternative civil service and this alternative civil service was in church, so you can face some barriers, so it would be or it would be very difficult to have a work in state institutions, or it's not like the case. Maybe Yuri?
Great. Well, in that regard, I would say that we are still quite lucky here in Finland. Of course, there's social stigma that is associated with going through the alternative civilian service or total objection route, but legally speaking, any employers are not allowed to ask how have you gone through your service, whether you've gone to the military or if you've gone gone through whatever way, they cannot ask it. For example, in the top interview, if they ask it, the way in which we say to our members is that just lie if you want, because like they are not allowed to ask it, so just lie. It's okay. But I would say that it's more so social. So, for example, in these sort of situations, like a normal Finnish situation, you're in a sauna with your friends, you're throwing slowly more water onto the kivas, and then you're just talking about military at the time when you went to military. I would say that it's more social. It's more that sort of a, this sort of a thing that everyone shares and is assumed that everyone shares. So I think that would be it. Of course, like us being in the board, at least I can speak for myself. I don't really, I'm not ashamed of, of course, not ashamed of being or having gone through the civil service. But then, for example, let's say there's a news article, or and there has been many. You can just look through the comments, and they are not positive. So if you go out into the public sphere or media sphere and you say that you're a civil servant, that you've gone through the civil service, most definitely the attitude will not be positive. But yeah, it's more so social in that way, I would say.
Oh, okay. So we have this stigma in social also, but yes, unfortunately, it affected also in the officials and organizations that can offer you a job. Maybe now, Tuka, can I ask you about some personal experience? So I do not have any notes, so in compare with Matthias. So, but our colleagues from the movement of consensual subjectors, they don't know Matthias and his background. So now, Tuka, can you please describe your personal experience with alternative civil service and how it was? Yes, please.
Yes, I think the biggest problems I had was with my parents. I had to discuss a little bit with them, but when I finally decided to transfer, because I transferred military service, I didn't face that much criticism, and as it was COVID, the year of COVID, 2020 to 2021, I wanted to get a new civil service place very quickly. So the first place that answered my call and was a daycare center in Tampere. And luckily, I was able to work there for the time remaining. So I would call it very mundane physical labor with the kids, all these kind of standard activities. And I also read in the newspaper about the sort of sports instructor for the city who was put on leave during COVID, and they also did the sort of labor in the daycare, and their job sounded exactly like mine. So I would say that this sort of general help person would be what I would call my service. But I enjoyed my service quite much, but of course I had some trouble, mostly with the sort of social stigma. There were a few employers who I felt they bullied me and treated me not nicely. But luckily, my supervisor was very, very nice person, and I was able to persevere in these sort of hostile conditions.
Great. And maybe I can ask here also a question. So, if I'm right, it's possible to make your service is very close to your profession. So, example, if you want to be, I don't know, maybe a lawyer, is it possible to make your service in the sphere of law? Maybe you mentioned that it's possible to have a service in private organizations. Yes,
yes, any organization with the adequate funding that is non-profit can, in theory, apply to receive a civil servant. And there are some exceptions, like political parties are a big no-no. They just simply cannot have a civil servant. But many organizations can get a civil servant. I think the biggest and funniest and sometimes shocking example is that Finland has a lot of public theaters. So in theory, you could do your civil service in a theater. and there has been some discussion that it's unfair, and I think the rule is that you cannot get any sort of student credit or anything like personal benefit from that. So as long as you don't like personally benefit in your civil life directly, then it's allowed to choose your. And of course, you're allowed to apply for any of these open jobs for in the civil service market. So you're not forced to do, unless you cannot find any. Then you might be directed to certain civil service place.
Yeah,
But the sort of very large amount of freedom is one of the primary reasons why I think many people prefer civil service to total objection.
No, I'm asking because I think it's a very good opportunity to have an experience in your sphere. So do not it's very common word in Russia that you just waste your time in army or also waste your time in alternative civil service, because in Russia it's mostly hospitals, maybe post offices, and some services on the streets, housing services, and so on. So it's not like we had one interesting case in the movement of concession subjectors. So it was a guy who started as an actor, and we were lucky to help him to receive an alternative civil service in a public theater. Also, it's a theater that funded by the government, by the region. I didn't remember, maybe it was Moscow. So yes, but it was very difficult because you need to apply for alternative civil service, and we do not have a list, like open list. So you mentioned list, yes. Here a military office decides of the place, and you can also offer them, for example, an invitation. So you receive an invitation from the institution, from the organization, and you can give it to the military office and only ask them to send you to this place. But sometimes they deny, and it's very difficult to challenge it in court even. Okay, thank you. And Yuri, also, can I give a floor to you to describe a little bit your personal experience, the concession subjector in Finland. Where did you do your service, and how it was, and how much money did you receive?
Well, I didn't certainly become rich by doing it, but I did it in Plan International. So it's this children's rights organization located, or its offices in Finland are located in Helsinki. So as I said earlier, I moved from Tampere there. For me, it was, I would say, a mixed bag of a year, because socially speaking, I didn't really know many people. And in that sense, it was quite difficult. Many of the co-workers, as one can expect, were older. They were like 30, 40 years old. And I was 18, so yeah, quite strange having my first sort of a work experience there. For the 11 months, but then it was still, I was doing something for a good organization. That's the way that I can take the good out of it. I was doing, maybe as also Matthias explained about his service, I was doing these sort of mundane tasks as well, like some sort of file management, and so at the end of my service, I got to do some more interesting jobs. Like there was this national section of the organization that had some projects were being made with the youth, with the local youth, and some immigration projects that had to do with immigration. So those were quite interesting, but yeah, I don't really know what to think about it. Like, to be honest, like that was my main motivation to become a part of AKL, because it really opened my eyes to many of the inequalities of our system. And I would still say, regardless of the fact that yes, we are doing quite well with our system and it could be way worse, there's a lot of opportunities for many people. There's still many people, including myself, can face these sort of feelings of I would say just pointlessness and just knowing what to do, because like there really may not be much to do and you still have to be there for the 8 hours. It's legislated by the law. So yeah, a mixed bag, I would say.
So yes, and Also, maybe I have a question here. According to the last interview with Mite Jakonin, he mentioned that there are some people who made, if we can name it, like total consensus objection, yes, in Finland, and do something change in this way? I mean here, and I would like to ask you here about some punishments from the state, about liability from the state, and what kind of liability do you have in Finland? So I noted that Mite Jakonen received home arrest, if I'm not mistaken, for 6 months. Yes, so it was half a year, if I'm not mistaken. So, and did something change? Did something change, or maybe what kind of liability do you have if person do not want to go through alternative civil service? Maybe yes, Tuka.
Well, to be that most people do this sort of surveillance sentence because it's cheaper for the government. So, but during if we inspect this surveillance punishment more in depth, I would say the biggest liability is this sort of daily activity requirement. You're allowed to you're in practice allowed to work, but you have to give your weekly schedule to the surveillance squad beforehand. And if you for some reason do not obey the schedule, then your surveillance sentence might be terminated and turned into a prison sentence. And of course, you have to have a place. You have to have a place where you may participate in the surveillance sentence. So it's up to you to get yourself an apartment for that. And I think the final thing is full abstinence from narcotics and alcohol. So you're not allowed to drink, and you might that might be a reason your surveillance sentence is revoked. And if you choose to do it in a prison, then you're treated pretty much just like any other inmate. And in Finland, we have this idea of rehabilitative justice, where you're allowed to perform activities, if possible. I think most most total objectors would study or take part in some sort of work program if they wanted in their prison sentence.
Interesting, but this one is this idea of total consensual subjection. Of course, it's connected deeply with ideas and beliefs of person. But can I ask here also a question about exemptions from the military service? Sometimes in Russia it was it's still difficult to change military service with alternative one, but sometimes you can receive exemptions. It's not like about your beliefs, about your ideas and about your views against military service, but you can simply be a student, or you can, for example, in Russia, according to the decree of Vladimir Putin, he installed the exemption for IT workers. So now a lot of people who work in IT organizations, they can receive an exemption from military service for the period of working in organization. Not so much people, because there are a limited list of organization, but it's like possibility. And talking about Finland, how is it possible to receive some exemptions? I assume that you have an exemption because of the studying at university, that we can call educational exemption. But what other exemptions do you have? Maybe family exemptions, social exemptions, and another one that allows people to evade from army legally without any services. Yes, maybe Matthias, can you start?
Yeah, so like this sort of exemption due to studies, it's like it's not permanent. That it's just like they give you like extra time of like 3 years, and then ask again, and so you can't avoid army just by that. But like these permanent exemptions include, well, the most common one is medical reasons.
Mhm.
Like, for example, like many people avoid military by talking about their mental health. It's not good enough, so yeah, they get exempted. And the other reason for exemption is mm, citizenship. Like if you have a dual citizenship,
Hmm.
like you're the citizen of two nations, then I think that was it that it automatically like exempts you from the military service.
Oh wow!
And
I sorry, I have a joke here because some close friends of Vladimir Putin, they have Finnish citizenship, and now I understood that they were exempted from the military service because they saved Russian citizenship and they have dual citizenship. Wow, interesting. So it's
yeah,
something unique, I can say. Yes, sorry, I interrupted you.
yeah, I don't think you implemented anything important because I think those are the two like real exemptions. I think not
Hmm.
anyone uh, add on if I'm forgetting something.
Like, can I ask here about the extension? So it's I can understand that you mentioned that it's temporary, so it's not like permanent. But is it possible? You mentioned you have a conscription age from 18 till 30. Yes, so like in Russia now. And is it possible to use this extensions from, for example, 18 years old till 30 years old, and to evade from the army legally, or it's not like a case? Yuri, maybe you can answer.
Sure. You can, as Matthias said, you can try to extend it, or you can try to like apply for
Mm-hmm.
a postponed service. But then usually it takes the duration of, say, 2 years or whatever they say. I to be honest, I'm not certain if the most usual one is 2 years, but usually goes in the way that they give you X period of time, and then you apply again, and maybe X period of time, and then again. But then when you're 28,
Mm-hmm.
in practice, it goes in the way that when you're 28, they will not give you anymore. So then you
Mm.
have to go or just do something else. And it also goes in the way in which we have our passports. They have an expiry date of 5 years. So let's say you're 26 turning 26, and you need to get a passport. You will not get it. You will get it only for 4 years.
Ah.
Or if you're 27, you will only get it for 3 years. So you will not get it like any further on because they are afraid that you will leave the country.
Ah, so it's
Like,
smart. It's smart. The idea that Russian authorities, they didn't think about it, so it was possible to be a student till
yes.
in 2022 we still have the conscription age between 18 and 27, and it was possible to be a student from 18 to 27 and then to receive your military ID without going to the military service. It was it was a permanent exception, if I can say. Okay, and here I would like to ask maybe not about some military service, but about the situation in Finland, because Finland is very important country for our organization, not only because we have a partners like AKL, but unfortunately that we have a lot of Russian asylum seekers because of the war, and I read according to some newspapers, I didn't check all sources, but a lot of Finnish newspapers wrote approximately about 800 people who entered Finland and asked for asylum only because of the mobilization that started in Russia in 2022. And unfortunately, there are some peculiarities with these proceedings. So now, in October 2024, now there are a lot of news that people still do not receive any answers. So not like any refusals or approvals, but simply answers. And we sent a lot of messages to the Finnish government. It was also a meeting between Yulia Navalny and the representatives of Finnish government. But I would like to maybe just understand your point of view, because you're locals, and I'm not asking for expert opinion here, but what do you think? Is it Is it maybe the idea of Finnish government just to delay all these cases because they do not have any guideline what to do with a lot of people from Russia that they have because of the war, and because some people who can call them deserters, we can understand that it's very specific group of people, yes, and it's very a lot of governments in Europe, they are scared now when they hear the word deserters. But what do you think? Is it on purpose, or maybe it's indirect idea of Finnish government just not to do something? And do asylum seekers from Russia have any perspectives in Finland or in this situation, or it's very difficult? So maybe Tuka, can you start?
I think there are two perspectives here. The first perspective is that it's politically inconvenient to talk about migrants in Finland at this very moment, because migrants have been used as this sort of tool to make people afraid and give the government more power, and because of this sort of fear element that is associated with migrants and asylum seekers, this sort of idea of a legitimate migrant is something that people usually don't come up with. But there was one interview where somebody said, well, if somebody goes through Russian wilderness and comes through Finland and be this sort of hero, then they can fit this sort of narrative. But I think secondarily, Finnish immigration services they have a very slow process, and Ukrainians received this sort of express line to get protection because the European Union decided so. But Russian objectors don't have this express line, so I think Migri would be very sort of intimidating, and they would require a lot of evidence, which of course is very hard to get in the Russian deserter context. But I think Russian asylum seekers are culturally pretty welcome, because the idea is that, well, that's the right thing to do, not to participate in war. But in practice, they might face racism or this sort of maltreatment for being Russian.
No, yes, of course, we do some advocacy work in Finland, and we are lucky to have some contacts with Russian politicians. As I mentioned, Yulia Navalny, she is now very popular because of the death of Alexei Navalny in Russia, and of course, for her, it's better to speak in person with a lot of representatives of governments, not like for all human rights organizations, because of course we objectively are not so popular like she. But I'm talking about the feeling maybe of society, of community in Finland. What can you note? What did you notice? I understand that maybe on the level of the government, it's really inconvenient to talk about migrants now because of the politics and because of the another way of thinking, the politics in Finland. But what about the community and society? What do they think? Because as I understood from our dialogue today, so in Finland, from my point of view, there are a lot of things in questions of alternative civil service and concession subjection are already made by the government. So I can understand that maybe it's not ideal, but it's better than, I can say that it's better than in Greece, in Turkey, in Russia, of course. And what about the feeling of society in Finland, of locals? How do they understand, or maybe they speak, maybe they discuss this situation, that there are a lot of people from Russia who entered Finland and they applied for asylum seekers, or maybe they do not have any opinion. Yuri, maybe you can help with the answer.
Yeah, I'll try. Well, it's not the easiest of situations to be in, to be frank. I would say that socially or culturally the shift has been rather drastic. So before 2022 February, it had been so much easier for anyone to apply here, or any sort of reasons to move, to seek help, to seek shelter. But then, as of now, as many must know, there's been there's maybe this sort of a crisis mentality. One could maybe describe it in such a way. We've had fear of thousands of migrants coming through the forests in our eastern border from Russia, and that's sort of a mobilized migration used by the state of Russia. So I don't know. It's a very difficult situation. Personally, I've been with Sasa from MCO trying to lobby in the Parliament of Finland. It was maybe March of 2024, I believe, that we were in the Parliament talking to some MPs. And I can remember that people wanted to take pictures, but nothing changed. I think that's the sort of atmosphere that you get. So people are happy to help, but when it's about Russians, just the fact that person comes from that country, it makes everything so much more difficult. Like politically, there's not much leeway there. In addition to the border crisis, there's examples of, for example, like there's this project of building a fence. So we have a long border with Russia, but there in many areas there has been no physical fence. But now, despite the analysis of many, or let's say all experts, that it's a negative effect that it has, but we are still building a fence in between Russia and Finland. So I think that's quite a clear image of the way in which our relations as nations have unfortunately developed. Personally, I would really hope that there would be still there needs to be some sort of a leeway with these sort of discussions that we have here, and all types of cultural connections that can be made, because otherwise, there needs to be some hope for the future. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, we need these sort of personal connections between our countries and not between our political leaders, but between the people of our nation, I would say.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we hope maybe some advocacy job in Finland. So we're now sending a lot of messages and we're in touch with some politicians, also, of course, in Russia, who are in exile, to help with this question, because, of course, some border countries, the important ones, because there are a lot of people tried to seek for asylum. And it's not only maybe about Finland, but we have some similar problems in Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and in countries like Armenia, Kazakhstan. But luckily it was news on Friday, last Friday it was news of the first deserters who received travel documents and reached France. It was 8 deserters who stayed in Kazakhstan. So maybe this practice will change a little bit, and so because now in Kazakhstan, Armenia and Kyrgyzstan, for example, it's not like the safest countries because of the strong connections with Russia, and there were some examples of kidnapping a person. I remembered when we with Yuri was in Spain, and while we were on the conference, I received the messages that one guy from Kazakhstan was kidnapped by Russian military police, and we still have this case. And of course, unfortunately we can recognize that these countries are not safe. Yes, and maybe some last question that I have today, but I'm quite interested to know your opinion, guys. It's about the Finland and the treaty with NATO. So in Russia there were a lot of articles from the state media that Finland did something wrong, and it was like, I don't know, Russian propaganda, Russian state media, they were very mad about it, and we have a funny joke that ironical joke a little bit, that Putin started the war just to minimize the NATO near the borders, but now it's like Finland, and the border with Finland is now border of Russia with NATO countries are now longer than it was in 2022. So the pure goals of Vladimir Putin, yeah, they still not reached. So what do you think? Is it good, or maybe is it bad? Is it good? I mean, what Finnish government state about it? Is it bad for concession subjectors? Is it bad because of militarization? And we mentioned today militarization at schools. Is it bad because maybe in the future we can see in Finland some bills against concession subjectors and some barriers, maybe an alternative civil service? What do you think in terms of concession subjection only? Maybe Matthias, can you start?
Okay, so in terms of conscientious objection, well, it's quite ironic because I remember, and well, there has been kind of like even written mentions about people saying that joining the NATO is good thing because then we don't have like mandatory military service anymore, or the other way around. The mandatory military service must be kept because without that we have to join NATO. So people were this was back when the NATO question wasn't so when it was more divisive and not as homogeneous as today when most people are pro NATO. But okay, now we have joined NATO, but there has been like zero concrete talks about dismantling the mandatory military service. So that was a lie. So yeah, well, so I don't think NATO being part of NATO isn't gonna affect the mandatory military service dramatically, at least. Like there might be some adjustments to the military system, but not anything too large. The military will stay mandatory for half the population, and yeah.
Yuri, can I give the floor to you also?
Well, at least it's not going to make our situation any easier, I would say. It's quite funny the way in which Matthias correctly described the way in which it was advertised, perhaps, this joining the NATO, that when we join the NATO, now we'll have more leverage and now we'll have more space to move within our social sphere with regards to the way in which we organize our military and our social structure. But I would say that it's pretty much the opposite. I mean, now that we are not, there's this term of Finlandization that some may know. It is this term that was used in the times when the Soviet Union was still in place, and we had this political consensus of trying to be really, how do you say it, like really sensitive with regards to all questions that might upset the Soviet Union. So we called that Finlandization. Our political leaders, they really stepped out, like they're really sensitive about everything. So I would argue that we've become Finlandized with regards to USA as of now, because now we are the best students of NATO. We have the B-2 bombers flying in our airspace, and we want to put, let's say, there was this one political candidate running for the presidency of Finland who said, I don't remember like how many, was it like 3% of GDP should be allocated to for the military spending instead of 2%. And yeah, well, it's not going to make it any easier, but maybe to be a little bit hopeful as well. I would also say the same that Laura Lodenius, the executive director of the Peace Union of Finland, long-term peace advocate, said in an interview that I read, was that she said that now that we are a part of NATO, we just need to think of the way in which we can advocate for peace within the NATO, so within those structures. So I don't see that we are gonna, get out of it. So we'll just have to work with it. So it's not the best. It's not any better, maybe, but it is what it is.
Yes, but I can mention here that it's funny that Lithuania also brought the conscription back, and they are a member of NATO for a long period of time, if I'm not mistaken, from 2004, and also this idea of canceling the conscription only because you're joining NATO, it looks like hypocrisy a little bit. And Tuka, maybe you also have something to add here?
Yeah, certainly. Being this sort of model citizen of NATO is a very hard task, because I think many Finland's policies are then going to be used to justify changes in other countries. So when conscription is probably if some European countries or even the United States say that, well, bring conscription back, then they can always point to Finland and say, well, Finland has conscription. But I think hopefully, instead of just looking at we have conscription, they should look at what kind of conscription we have. I think this sort of idea that during wartime everybody has a right to their opinion and to their stance on war is a very, very good lesson probably for NATO. So I hopefully this can lead to good or bad results, but hopefully whatever the results are, it's not the Third World War, because I think humanity will not survive that regardless of the outcome. So hopefully there is this hope that Yuri is talking about, because without it, the world looks really grim.
Yes, Matthias?
Yeah, I can add a bit to that. Like, maybe the Finnish military system can be a positive example that it looks rather slim, the possibilities for that, because in South Korea, when few years ago they constructed made civil alternative civil service an option, they used Finland as they took inspiration from Finland in sense that, well, in Finland the alternative service is twice longer than the military service, so it's okay that our alternative service is 3 years when the military service is 1.5. But they didn't take any inspiration from the good sides of a Finnish conscription system, like you can choose what you will work in and you have lots of free time. You are not like caged in an facility, well, in Korea's case, prisons, but like in a worker. So yeah, that example kind of shows that the militarists will use Finland. They will take the bad sides of the Finnish military system and try to paint them as the good sides, and just ignore the things that we have actually done right. So yeah, sorry to kind of let everyone down with this, but it was kind of like fitting to notice, because this was exactly the reason why I called in that Korean conference to kind of lecture them about this sort of issue, that they're just cherry picking the side of the Finnish system that they want to promote. But yeah.
Okay, so I hope that it would be, maybe in the future, it would be the join into NATO, maybe it would be an argument to highlight the hypocrisy on this case that we mentioned, that there were nothing with conscription, nothing positive, and I hope nothing negative with concession objectives, and maybe it would be a point or an argument for the future bills, for the future ideas to completely cancel the conscription. So it's like the top idea for the all non-governmental organization, that anti-militarist non-governmental organizations. Okay, thank you guys. I think that I I'm run out of all questions, and I would like to say thank you for joining today. Sorry again for the difficulties in the beginning with connections. I mentioned that we have Discord blocked in Russia, and it was the first webinar that we did in this status with Discord. Okay, and so I would like to thank you, Yuri, Tuka, Matthias from the
Thank you so
AKL,
much.
Anti-Militarist Peace Organization from Finland, and I wish you a good work in Finland and all your ideas with all your applicants. Okay, thank you, and now I think I can finish